Good evening, everybody, and welcome to Railroad Empires, how we're building them. Uh, Tonight's episode is going to be all about introductions to our layouts and some possible scenery composition details in that. Andy's now going to jump in and give you all a backstory on where we came up with this concept.
So, as many of you watch most of our videos know, we've done some cameras down stuff over the last couple of years. We hope to do more and more of that, improve that. A lot of that's been structure assembly, a little bit of scenery, a little bit of rolling stock, more detail-oriented stuff. But the vast majority of us are layout builders. And while we build small details, structures, and all that equipment, it's all in the grander, bigger scheme of producing an entire layout. And there's a different mindset around building such a large construction as a layout versus a singular project or a diorama or a single structure. Those are slightly different personalities and much different scale projects. Well, we've watched Robert and Lloyd, Tim, me, and a whole group of other people in our community go from start to finish on building our layouts. And that's just pretty good content. All of us are really entertained by other YouTubers who give us the follow along on their layouts. So what we wanted to do, and Robert's idea, and a lot of us jumped on board and got real excited about this concept, is a breakdown of from start to finish how we've done it. You know, we're not all tearing our layouts down and starting over from scratch, but how we've done each of the major phases of producing a layout in a series of shows from that. While this first show will be us talking about that, from here on out, the rest of the shows will be predominantly cameras over the shoulder in our layout rooms while we're working on the layouts and talking about some specific portion of our layout. It was a great idea, and I'm really excited to go forward with it.
So the goal of the show, like Andy was saying, is to give you a top-down view of how we're working on our layouts. We're really kind of focusing in on that and going from a start to finish. So if you're kind of sitting back going, thinking to yourself, man, I really want to start, this is a good show to really start in on, and so you can see how we're building our layouts. Lloyd's going to jump in and work on and explain that a little bit more and how that's going to look for the show.
Okay, hi everybody. So right now we've got about 10 shows that are planned, starting with the most basic one, which is bench work. Then we'll go to roadbed, another show on track work. Then we're going to have electrical, pretty much all the basic stuff. and then we're going to go into terrain, ground cover, structures, roadways, including sidewalks, and final scenic touches. So we're going to touch about everything, but pretty much in a, what do you call it? Easy step. We're not going to go into advance. So like Robert and Andy were saying, we're going to have a camera on top of whatever we're doing. So back at you, Robert.
Thank you, sir. So my railroad is Prairie Creek Subdivision. It's fictional Southern Pacific Railroad. Andy's is working on the Clinch Valley Railroad. Tim's got his own going on over here called Wayman Rails. And Lloyd is working on MHO Junction. Lloyd's going to go ahead and jump right back in here and give you a good explanation of his layout.
Okay, so my layout, I just have to go back a little background here. I bought this house 5 years ago, and I started on a layout. No, before I started on layout, I spent a lot of time looking at videos and photos for almost 6 months before deciding what to do. And then I got started and was approached by Bill, the track planner, that said, what are you doing? So he wanted to know if I wanted trains that go round and round, or did I want operations? So since I didn't know anything about trains, I told him, okay, let's go with operation. And here's the space I have. So I have 40 feet by 20 feet in the L shape. I have a staging. I have helix. And pretty much the entire layout is flat or almost flat. So it's going to be 5 years in November, and I still have a bit of bench work to do, a bit of track, and that's mainly where my brewery is going to be, and of course everything else that goes with it. So my layout is in the 1970s, and I will have all 4 seasons. Yes, all 4 seasons, even snow. So what else can I say about my layout? I'm pretty much advanced. I've got my fascia done. I've got my, I started working on the valance. No, sorry, the valance is done. The fascia, I'm working on it. And I'm doing some scenery. I'm doing about everything right now. So it's going to be fun to be able to follow on whatever subject we are at. Like I still have electrical stuff to do. Plenty of electrical stuff to do. And that would be about it. Anything else you want to add to that, Robert?
Not really. Andy, do you have any questions that we need to answer in the chat?
I don't have any yet, but we'll give it a few minutes and we'll pick up a few. If you guys have any questions about Lloyd's particular layout, I know a lot of you guys have seen it on camera. If you have some questions about the design inspiration for it, because that's a lot about what this show is, ask them and we'll pick them up between some of the other layouts, or at the end of this show we'll catch some questions.
Absolutely. So Lloyd, did you do any scenery composition ahead of starting it, like dropping your bench work or raising your bench work up, anything like that to get you elevation?
Yes, I did. When I got the plan from Bill, the track planner, everything was flat. And at first, since I didn't know much, I thought it was great. Then when I started building, I started changing some elevations. And I had seen from videos or pictures or forums that, like the 2% grade. So I kept it at 2%, made sure all my radiuses were 30 inches so that I wouldn't have any problems. So yeah, I did well, my scenic composition was as I go along. Like at one point, you'll see in future videos that I had a flat area and I didn't know what to put there, so I decided to make a gorge because I wanted trestles. So
Nice.
during the construction, I did change a few things as I went along.
So, at what point in your process did you decide to do all 4 seasons on your layout?
To be honest, before getting the plan back from Bill the Track Planner, I just wanted something original that not a lot of people have. And
Nice.
I must say that doing 4 season is
Not an
really
easy task.
it's not an easy task. But what did help though is that the layout, the way it is built, if you're in the summer area, you cannot see the winter. And if you're in the winter area, you cannot see autumn or spring. So
Nice.
the layout is designed in a way where wherever you are, that's the season that you're looking at. And it really blends. By autumn there's a transition to winter, winter transition to spring. So, and with that, I also have my lighting, which is I've got night lights and daylights.
Nice.
So
That's
yeah,
very cool. I'm very excited about that.
Hey Lloyd, Al asks, how would you start over with bench work, or possibly, and I'd like to, my own addition to that is, what you've learned over the past 5 years of building it. Are there some significant things that you would change that you had learned as you went along that would be good to talk about in this intro versus possibly in the bench work specific show?
we're going to see in the bench work, but if there's one thing I learned is that um, I Bill had designed the plan for 43 inches. If I was to start over, I'd probably make it 50 inches, a little bit taller. And my staging is at 24 inches from the floor. I would raise it up so, because I don't know if you know, but to go under a layout with 24 inches is not a good thing.
Nice. Any more questions, Andy?
We did have a comment from Creative Rails who had missed the start of the show. We have a brief intro video to this one for all of you guys that are catching up, where we have the kind of layout at a glance concept, where we broke down just the basic details. If you go back and grab that first few seconds of that first little moment of that video, you'll see each of our layout plans, track plans, digitized for all of us, including all the labor and work that took for some of us who didn't have digital plans to begin with, and a layout at a glance thing that will tell you the brand of track, brand of turnouts, turnout size, minimum radius, grade, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. It'd be worth going back at the end of this and just grabbing that first section, because it'll go into some of that 30,000 foot view of each of our layouts if you're interested.
Awesome. All right. Well, if Tim's back, you back, Tim? Get that technical issue worked out? Good. All right, man. So you're up. Going to explain your layout and maybe some key scenic elements that you might have for the scenery composition.
All right. Sorry about that. My new computer decided to BSOD right as you started talking a while ago.
Nice.
So, all right. So my layout is a CSX division with, it's possibly going to have an interchange with Norfolk Southern. I'm in my attic and we rent, so I've got to keep, things fairly modular. I'm kind of limited on height, so I can't do, real high multi-level. I'm about 33 to 36 inches on height. I've got a dormer, and I've got a full stand-up attic. Mostly, it's all sloped walls, except for the dormer. So it kind of limits me on my design space. So I have come up with a track plan that kind of works up here, and it may modify yet. There's my current track plan of what I'm planning on doing. My main scene that I focused on to start with was I had won the Central Valley bridge through the YouTube Model Builders back in the day when we were doing that stuff. And I got together and I wanted to display that as a main primary focus display piece. So I had to design in the bridge, and I put in a waterfall and a mountain scene in the back. And I had this big, long, sweeping curve to do something with. and it looked real boring. So I put in my rock work, which you're actually seeing on my screen behind me with my locomotives in front of it right now. And that's kind of become my focal point of my layout right now. Plus, I've got my grain silo that I've built, scratch built everything on it. I'm all foam and wood stud structure. There's no plywood underneath my foam. I'm foam straight on my bench work, except for in the river seat where I drop down to get the extra drop. I went straight to plywood underneath. There's a little creek in front of my locomotives where they're at right now to drain water from the rocks as they leak out water, drain it across the track, basically out into the walkway, because that's where the river is going to also dump out to. That was an afterthought after I put in all the rock work. Like, man, I want to fill this area in behind the tracks with something between the tracks and the rock. Well, a little pool of water would pool there. So, but then we need to drain that off so it doesn't just sit there and constantly stagnate. And that would be, another scene composition I had to come up with middle of things. So I came back in and carved a little stream coming out from underneath the tracks.
Nice. Lloyd, do we have any questions for Tim and his layout? You're muted, Lloyd.
Sorry. No, none so far.
All right. Awesome. Anybody got any questions for Tim at all? Crickets? Chirp, chirp.
Chirp, chirp.
There was one question from Al wondering if it was worth going through build a track planner. And like I answered, in my case, when I started this whole project, I didn't know anything about trains. I've never been on trains, never had trains, didn't know anybody with trains. So he was great help, and it was all worth it for me.
So on a tangent, then I'm going to deviate a little bit. What got you into model railroading if you'd never been on a train before and never knew anybody with trains?
I bought a house with a basement I didn't know what to do with.
Oh. All right, fair enough.
That's the opposite of most of us. Most of us, we buy a house looking for a basement so we can put our trains in. Lloyd's like, I got a basement. What can I do with it? Oh, model train.
I'm going to have a good friend of ours design my house.
Bill asks about how easy is it to move around there, Tim, moving around in your layout space.
It's not too bad, actually. I'm going to have some drop sections and some lift up sections and maybe a swing gate in one spot. But otherwise, I've got, there's actually probably a 12-foot ceiling in here. So I'm not crawling around or anything like that.
That'd be really rough if you actually had a normal peak.
Yeah. But I've got a dormer. So I've got a 10-foot, 12-foot ceiling over there. And it's just when I get closer to the walls, I start running out of, heights.
Yeah.
Right here next to me, I've got probably a 4-foot section I could put a wall in and run trains along it. I could put in little jack walls.
So, Tim, Big Bill's got another question. How's it in the summertime up there?
Hot.
And winter?
I think you might need a little insulation going up there, buddy.
I put in a window air conditioning unit, and I've got some fans to circulate the air, so it's not too bad. And in the winter, I've got a space heater, and our upstairs furnace. We're in basically a 3-story house, and the furnace for our second floor is right up here. And so it kind of helps keep this fairly warm in the winter. And so it's not too bad. And if I put in jack walls or anything, I'm going to eventually insulate all this. And I've got some rolled insulation I'm waiting to put up to when I get some more stuff cleared out of here.
Like say that you got from 10-foot high it runs down to the floor level.
Yeah.
So Bill's got all kinds of questions tonight. Wants to know, does the temperature affect the track, such as buckling and things like that?
I've not seen any issues with it myself. The only time I've had issues with buckling track is when I bump the layout.
I'll do it every time.
Especially where the track's not glued down yet, where I've just got temporarily laid in place. That's where I have problems with it buckling, is when I bump it. But otherwise, I've not had any issues with cracking or track moving or buckling. The biggest issue I have is keeping the track clean. But that's an issue we all have. So
The more track you have, the harder that job is.
Tell me about it.
that's why I love my brass cleaning car.
Nice. Any other questions before we move the shuffle along here?
No, that's about it.
All right. So I'm going to jump in to go ahead and explain my shenanigans. So I actually designed my layout. At least I put all the work in. I had a lot of input from Model Railroading Live community members that are on the nightly chats, such as Lloyd. Andy threw in some stuff. Tim helped out. The Mudfather did. Chris Rude. I mean, there was a big collaborative effort. So my layout is depicting basically Tacoma, Washington. So if any of you guys are around here, you kind of know there's really only one season, spring-ish. I actually live out in Yelm, so it's pretty much wet, green, and rainy most of the time. There's about a year where a week where we get snow, 2 if we're lucky. So my layout is modeling basically 1983 to today. The reason I went with such a large era and time frame is because I wanted to be able to run fallen flags without them being excursion. So I can run Southern Pacific, I can run Burlington Northern, and I can run BNSF and UP on my layout, with it having a sense of realism as opposed to, like I said, just excursion service. So the bottom half of the yard down is the yard here. I've got my 13 by 15 foot layout split into 2. So like I said, half is the yard. The other half is just is gearing up for an industry, maybe 2 or 3. But for the most part, it's going to be scenery. Back in the back, I'll have some hidden staging. Sorry, I got distracted by the YouTube chat going on over here. So one of the things I kind of wanted to point out, and we were talking a little bit about scenery composition. In the early stages, I knew I really wanted to focus on the Ruston Point area of Tacoma. So that's where this tunnel came in. There's actually a tunnel that wraps around under North Tacoma, and goes right under all the houses and stuff and pops right out. So that's going to depict this part down here that I'm highlighting and running over is going to be all like almost waterfront, where the tracks are back behind it. The shaded green, I'm going to do some cityscape there. When you come out of the tunnel, and I actually built my bench work for this. If it wasn't such a mess, I'd flip the camera. But it's the bench work itself sits at about 54 inches, but the height, the total height on this corner only sits at about 28 to 30 inches. So it's roughly 2 feet deep. from track level to the bottom of the bench work. The idea there is to have a curved trestle, a wooden curved trestle, and doing like a waterfall, a rock waterfall scene, and with a river kind of shooting off of that. That was something I knew I wanted before I really started designing this. Like Tim, I won a double track Central Valley Model Work double track bridge, which is what I'm going to use to span the gap between these two edges of the layout here. Haven't decided if I'm going to go with a lift out or if I'm going to go with a swing up or kind of how that's really going to operate. So should be fun to build. As it sits now, I'm about halfway done with the basic work. I've got track down along the bottom half of the layout. I've got valances and fascias up on this half of the layout. I'm really, at this point, getting ready to start into scenery, which I'm going to hold off for the sake of this show, because that will be one of the things we cover later on down the road. The north half of the layout here, I barely have sub-road bed down, and I'm still kind of doing a little bit of tweaking on that to get it all straight and square and level. So that's where it's going to be. I'm going to be able to jump around and bounce around and have a good time with this show on that one. Andrew, you seen any questions for me?
No questions yet.
No questions, all right.
Yeah, Eric asks, are you going to model the bright yellow disc in the sky or just show a yard sprinkler in the trade room to keep it authentic? I said, I'm all for authentic, but waterproofing, $300 or $400 locomotives, probably not.
Yeah, I think I'm going to get around that with maybe some more gray in the lighting to get around that, and it'll be like nice and green all the time. So we'll get it covered without ruining our stuff.
Get you a fog machine and just turn it on a heavy setting.
I am doing
Robert,
fog.
covered.
So Robert, Big Bill, is this a one level? Or two
Bill,
level?
this is a one level layout. I am not ready to commit to a second level. If I did, I wouldn't really know where or how to do it.
Well, you did it on your previous layout to some degree, and for other people, this is his third layout that I have followed and watched him build. This is his third layout. That might be an interesting topic for all of us. What number layout is all of your layouts?
Yeah, so like Andy was saying, this is my third layout. I am by no means an expert on the subject matter. My first layout was basically an 8x8 table with a 4-inch offset down the middle. So basically 2 4x8 tables side by side, and there was a 4-inch gap in the middle of it. That one was a lot of fun to work on. I learned a lot of what not to do on that layout. Then I got frustrated, like most of us do with those, because there's really no way to get up there to do any work except for to climb on it. And once you get to a certain point, you can't climb on it anymore without damaging stuff. So I got a wild burr up my backside and decided I'm going to rip it out. That took me all of about 3 hours after I saved the stuff I wanted to. Second layout was a shelf layout that I was working on, and I actually used the closet-made shelf system that you can get at Home Depot. Put the whole shelf layout up in a day. Didn't even take me that long. I threw foam core, the pink foam right on top of that, and then started going to town on that one. And I got about, I'd say about 90% of the track work done. Then I found out I was getting transferred up here, so that one came out, and this is what's in its place. This layout actually does have pieces in it that were from the very first layout I did. I was able to salvage some of that wood, and it also has some of the wood that I had in the second layout.
On mine, this is my actual first large-scale layout. I had a train board when I was a kid. It was a 5x6 foot or 4x6 foot.
4x6.
He built it for me. 4x5. And then then I started building a layout at our old house for my son, and we moved down here to where we're at now. So that kind of got stuck in storage. Well, he still wanted something to do for trains, so I started building another layout, and I was actually going to do some scenery and foam work on it. The kids got into it, tore it up, so I said, all right, fine. And by that time, I was back into the hobby because I had started doing the scenery research and researching. And I got a fairly decent train for a cheap price, and was going to run it on his train with him. And then we moved from that house to this house, which was a lot bigger. That one was just a 4x8 table. And this house has this full attic that's basically the full size of the house. So it's almost 1,000 square foot attic. I've also got a basement, but it's only a half basement, and it's a really wet basement. So I was like, no, I'm not putting trains down there.
You'd need a few dehumidifiers to solve that problem.
Well, when it rains, there's water that actually shoots in the walls.
Oh, no, that's not good.
So humidifiers wouldn't do any good. I'd have literal waterfalls on my layout.
Robert, since we're talking about the number of layouts we've done, I guess this would be my second, because the first one I did kind of did not make sense. For example, I thought that I could reach 30 inches. So if I was on the other side of the layout, I could reach another 30 inches. So why not make it 60 inches wide? And when we talk about not having access to some of the tracks, that's exactly what happened. Because I had built like a mountain on one side, and to be able to paint the mountain, I would have to do it backwards. So that didn't. So anyway, so no, and I couldn't reach 5 feet away. So that's when Big Bill came in and says, "Wait, stop."
Also, Big Bill's the one that turned you on to Track Planner, huh?
Yeah, he sent me an email saying, like I was doing very good, except that what are you trying to do? Like,
you're doing great, but stop it because it's terrible.
so for example, he goes, "How are you going to do any operations?" Yeah, I'm going to take the cars from there and bring them there, and the next day I'll bring the cars back to where they were. That's operations, no? No. So, and like you said, being in this group here, we've learned a lot. I've learned a lot from this group. Yeah. Even electronics, Andy.
Yeah, Andy and Chris were inspirational for me, and really a necessity for me to understand the electronics aspect of doing this. But we'll definitely get into the electronics in a later show.
Well, I was gonna say, me, you, and Brian at the time kind of had a deal going on where we were racing on bench work there for a while.
Yeah,
who could get the bench work up the fastest?
We've got one question.
And that's why it's key to have a plan, because I mean everybody was amazed at how fast I got my bench work thrown up.
We've got a question for Big Bill, which I think we should keep till the end because it's to all four of us. So we could probably go with Andy.
Yeah, Bill, just so you know, man, like Lloyd was just saying, we're going to answer that one, save it, and answer that one at the end. So, yeah, let's go ahead and let Andy jump in and fill up 30 minutes. And
10 minutes, pop your stopwatches. But a brief comment on a couple things that we've talked about or that have been questions and comments first. And about Bill Baronic or Lance Midheim or any of the other track players out there. If you know all these weird proclivities that you have for operations or scene concepts, etc., that you want to do, and you have the ability to do that design, by all means, you're going to do it yourself. That's just how it is. And when you're first getting started, you don't know enough about what you don't know. You don't know what you don't know. So it's probably better to follow a concept that Joe Fugate has popularized with what he calls a chainsaw layout, or at least building just a module in the Toma fashion. Get your hands dirty, figure out what you like, what you don't like, and then you'll know what to tell a Bill Baronic or Lance Midheim. But for all of those people who are in the middle of that space, from they know a lot or from they know very little and they don't know what they don't know, to the people who know quite a bit and can do it for themselves, that's a really big gap. And I think that amounts to the largest percentage of the hobby. And I think the vast majority of those people would benefit from paying a Bill Moronic or someone else to help them get over all the things they don't know and things they don't know in order to get something operational that you enjoy. And that's the point of operations, is to make it enjoyable. Anybody can build a loop of track and make it run, but you're going to be bored rather quickly. Operations is something that will give you a lifetime of enjoyment from a single layout potentially. So this layout that I'm working on, the Clinch Valley district of the Norfolk Southerns, Pocahontas subdivision, started out as wanting to do a prototype, high fidelity, prototypical and prototypically accurate, sincere design. That means the track only runs through the scene one time. Directionally pure. That means every time you're looking at the track, you're looking north. Left is always to your, or west is always to your left. East is always to your right. Cardinal directions apply, because I wanted an operational layout. And you need to be able to get some muscle memory rather quickly about when it says you're going to make a westbound move, what you're going to do. Not have to think about where you are on the layout, all these weird turns and everything. If something in your plan says you need to make a westbound move and you don't know what direction west is pretty easily, you're going to have mistakes in operations. And that's not bad if you're just running trains by yourself, but you get 3 or 4 people on a timetable. You know, people get pink slipped for stuff like that on the real railroad. And it's not like we want our operations to be so cantankerous and confrontational that it won't be enjoyable. But if everybody plays Monopoly by a different set of standards and a different rule, it's not a very fun game to play. There has to be some basic rules. Operations are those basic rules. This is my 13th, if I count. If I count correctly. It depends on how you count. That's counting numerous 4x8 layouts, 2 in-scale layouts, a set of modules, an O-scale layout I built, an in-scale layout on a door I built when I was in the military. This is number 13 for me. And while I knew a lot about what I wanted conceptually and operationally, I didn't know a lot about how to do it in a modern way. I'd been out of the hobby for 15 years. I mean, I'd had a model runner subscription. I'd been watching videos and paying attention for many, many years. I'd seen static grass. I'd seen DCC. I had not done any of that, including DCC. I'd only very little experimented with a loader system when I was young and got out of the hobby. I never actually owned one and run one. But I knew I wanted operational, and I wanted something that was pretty prototypical and operated prototypical. And I was fascinated by steam locomotives after having run some excursion trains years ago. So I decided to go after a targeted time period, and I thought somewhere in the 50s, and I was going to narrow it down. I ultimately narrowed it down to 1950. However, I knew that I wanted to build something high fidelity from a scenery perspective. I wanted it to look pretty good. And I'm an engineer. I'm an engineer by training, by personality, probably, by education. And I do that professionally. And I'm not an artist. I don't claim to be. So those things are sometimes a struggle and a leap for me. So I built a small module to begin with, a 3-foot by 2-foot styrofoam module that I thought I would go back and put down on some framework if I used it. But I just wanted to get my head started and see if I could do something at the caliber that I seen in the magazines and on YouTube. And I was relatively happy with the results. Yes, I needed to improve from that point. I have improved from that point. The first one had ground foam on it. As most people know, I'm not a big fan of ground foam. I mean, it's great in a couch, I say. It makes it very comfortable. But I wanted static grass and 3-dimensional scenery. But I ultimately found that I was satisfied enough with that result, that with some improvement over time that I could get where I wanted. But I also found a few weird side effects. The styrofoam was solid enough on its own. Now, I have found places where I've needed to use some Gorilla foam, or Gator board, rather, recently on some very narrow benchwork on the top level that doesn't have a lot of support under it. I've had to use a little bit of aluminum support to span larger distances, but it's an effectively styrofoam layout. And this comes from a carpenter's son who ran a construction business during the downturn in the .com industry some years ago. I'm comfortable working with wood, but I wanted to experiment and see what I could do. And I was incredibly, and am still incredibly impressed with what a person could do with just foam and the right adhesive. So I just started building more modules, and it really grew out of proportion. It was meant to just go around a room that I was going to continue to live in that room. And eventually it's taken over that room and largely taken over this room, with this room being staging, etc. So you guys can go back and look at the plan, but I'm going to show that to you too while we briefly cover it.
Andy, don't forget the section that runs down the hallway.
Yeah, I originally did have a section going down the hallway, and eventually, I decided to not go down the hallway and to take over this room, partly because I wanted to keep my wife, but that was still going to be a removable section. But I was going to run staging down the hallway. But at one time, the second railroad I model the Norfolk Southern now. Recently, I've upgraded into 1987 because I find the locomotive is much more reliable. The scale trains and Exactra, Tangent, etc. Rolling stock and stuff is just so beautiful. And then Ralph's weathering really pushed me over the edge. I just wanted to participate in some of that weathering. This is the lower level that's effectively complete. It needs a little bit of track work finished up, but that's effectively complete. The layout, the part that you guys have seen me on the build show working with recently is this level. That is I'm working on the branch line that is the Russell Creek branch first. It's narrow. It spreads across a window that is covered in a backdrop, but also doesn't have a lot of support. So I found that the gator board that I started experimenting with proved incredibly successful for me. So I've carried on with that. However, the biggest thing that I was going for was an idea that Lance Midheim talks about. And it's scene composition. And it's exactly what you see when you watch a director walking around on a movie scene, holding his fingers up, thinking about what that camera is going to see as he walks around. That's exactly what he's doing. What we need to do as model railroaders, in my opinion, and in Lance Midheim's opinion, who talks about that, is to think about what we're doing from this perspective right here, to control your viewing angles. So that's what I wanted to do, was to do some scene composition to control these certain scenes. And especially with my multi-deck layout, I have things that oppose your ability to see it. The track is not at all at the front of the layout. Actually, much of it is toward the back of the layout and obstructed. The point of that is to make it to where you see scenes the way that I want you to see scenes. And it's presented with a fascia and a valance with lighting behind it that way, including some night effects. And here you can see the two levels that are presented behind that valance, because I'm trying to get as much density as I can out of the room. This little hallway that I have been working on, where the top level has to go over the aisles some. But even where it goes over the aisles, I am pulling a bridge out in front. So when you first walk in the entry, there will be a 7-foot tall bridge going across the aisle there. But I wanted to control how you viewed the layout. And I composed scenes from that. I don't know if someone else could have worked with me. They probably could have. But worked with me in order to produce the type of scenes that I wanted from the angles that I wanted to produce them from. So what I actually did starting out was not to design mine digitally via the track plans that you guys see, but I designed it from a scene-to-scene perspective, making compromises to connect those scenes together. I mean, I had a fundamental track plan. What I had was a track plan that showed what I was trying to recreate from the prototype. I was trying to recreate that. A linear track plan off the prototype. I started from that, and I knew that I needed sidings and yards, branches, etc. How I chose to wrap that around a room, I used the different scenes from each of these areas, laid them out of the room, and then figured out how to connect the scenes together. I did, and now have went back and digitized that track plan, but it was all about composing scenes that had a certain view, that had track going through it at some angles, etc., and maintained that directional purity and operational interest. And I had a bunch of operational considerations I cared about. This is a helper district. That's a big, big, big design consideration. If any of you guys are operators and care about something in particular, passenger operations, or you want to work as a yard master, or you're interested in industrial switching, or you want to run road trains on a double track main line, those things are going to force your design. That operational consideration forced my design. And while I've had a couple layouts that were somewhat operational, this one is the first layout I've ever built that was truly operational from the get-go, from the design phase. I was a member of a club years ago that we operated a couple times a month, and I fell in love with that process. And even though I'm trying to do this at somewhat a higher level than even we were many years ago, because many of us were new at that, most people think I'm a little bit obsessive compulsive, if not a complete OCD. But I have a very clear picture of what I want to complete, and I'm going pretty headstrong into doing so. But that's a 30,000 foot view of of the Clinch Valley District, May of 1987 now, shortly after the Norfolk Southern merger. So they're still Southern high hoods in tuxedo paint, Norfolk and Westerns mostly in black, maybe a blue when left alone. I'm also modeling the CSX Railroad, and it is no longer going down the hallway at just a stub-in staging. It's a complete through staging loop that goes out onto the railroad, so I can recycle trains in the operating session and have the effective moving scenery of the CSX and the interchange with the CSX. It'll be a pretty busy interchange, and I do not have a yard on my layout. I've chose not to model that because it wasn't important to the operational considerations. But that's the big picture. It's only 15 by 15 feet, mostly head leg track. That's about it. It's all styrofoam.
Okay, Andy, I got a question for you. Your work area is chaos, but your thoughts are crystal clear in your explanation. Good job, sir.
Well, the workshop is the place that catches it all. So a few years ago, I was doing nothing in here. This was the extra bedroom that I took over. And yes, and I do have a plan for even trying to organize this into something less or something more of an organized chaos. But when I was trying to work in the trade room, it stayed in some manner of project. Now the layout room is clean, has a little couch in there. We can hang out in the trade room, and we do sometimes when I'm working on it. I got it near perfect. So as I get to operations, it's very enjoyable. I have recently been working on a plan for my workshop to completely rebuild and sort that out. That's my plan now, is to start trying to get. It's hard to find a place that you can work in and still keep it organized. So I'm now working on restructuring this room around some of the maker stuff that I'm doing. Machines, etc. So I'm working toward having the workshop in as organized of configuration as I can possibly get it in. But this room also has a tremendous amount of staging in it. So it has staging coming out of the main rooms. It has the interconnect loop backs that cycle the two levels together. And then it has the top bench work as well. It has the level 4 bench work around the top of the walls. So this is a complicated room and a complicated room to get right, and I'm working on it.
It goes with a complicated guy.
Yeah, indeed.
I am a slightly complicated guy.
But Andy, you're very, how should I say this? I'm trying to think of the wording now. Literal, though. So when somebody says a chainsaw layout, we all know you break out the chainsaw.
Well, that's more of a colloquial term or a slang term to say that
For
you should
most
build
people,
something.
yes.
For most people,
Yes.
yeah. For you,
All
you
right.
literally broke out a chainsaw. Come on.
Generally, you should take me seriously, not literally. In the case of the chainsaw, literal might be more appropriate. Whatever tool gets a job done.
So let's go with this question from Big Bill, because it's a very good question, and maybe you can start off, Robert. So the question is, what is the least thing that you do not like about your layout, and what is the best thing that you enjoy about your layout?
Oh, worst thing about I hate these kinds of questions, man, because it really makes you sit back and ponder it and think about it and self-reflect a little bit. I think if I had it to do over again, on the south side of my layout from what the picture is, where the yard's at, I actually went 5 inches of foam. The idea behind that was to be able to put in like culverts and do different things with terrain if I wanted to later on. And my original plan was to do that around the whole layout. What we'll see, let me switch cameras here. But what you see on the north half of the layout is I actually went in and put in risers, basically, that I made of wood to bring it up to a single layer. Because I learned that from that mistake. And the other thing that drove this decision was costs. So, everybody's dealing with the coronavirus lockdown and funds are getting tight all over the place. So the real driver for this for me was cost. I could go out and spend $25 a sheet on 2-inch foam, or I could use scrap wood that I already had laying around and get the work done a little bit faster. So I went a little more economical and used the scrap wood I had to bring me up. I think once it's done, the thing I'm gonna enjoy most about my layout is this is the river scene and the waterfall scene, which it's messy. Please don't judge, but I'll show you what that kind of looks like. So it's gonna be super deep. Like I said, super messy too right now. It's kind of a catch-all because it's down low, but that total depth is about 26 inches from the track work. So it's going to be really neat to put a curved wooden trestle in there and put rock wall behind it and do a waterfall.
Okay, what about you, Tim?
My least favorite part is I probably should have actually started with a track plan. I didn't. I just started building. I had an idea in my head, which I guess could be considered a track plan, but I didn't have anything down on paper or digital. So I didn't have any measurements or anything to actually build off of. And I kind of wish I had, but it was the computer I was using at the time kept crashing every time I was trying to do it. I was trying to put in too much information. But I'm making it work, and I'm going to wind up probably modifying some spots in my layout. My most favorite part is some of the scenery that I've got done already. The scene that I was showing earlier, where I've got the little stream there, and the rock work turned out really well. I have my bridge in, and I had some rock work on it, and it turned out well to start with. But I didn't put a base coat on my plaster rocks, so the paint has soaked in and has faded over time. So that's going to have to get repainted. But other than that, that's probably it on the worst and favorite parts of it.
Andy, what about you?
Least favorite's the structural stuff of actually getting to the point where, the crazy thing is, as an engineer, I like the electronics, and I very much enjoyed hand laying track work. I find that incredibly peaceful to build track work components. Those kind of engineering things that require some thought. The structure stuff, like hanging the center peninsula from the ceiling as I'm doing, those things I find incredibly frustrating to work with. And what surprises me considerably is that the parts that I didn't think I'd like at all, like the scenery, I'm in love with doing those artistic things that I don't at all but consider myself artistic. I really love those things. Static grass, building trees, spectacular. Don't mind the Arduino stuff. I actually enjoy that pretty good too. I despise having to actually build framework and bench work and construction, and I thought I would like that stuff.
Well, for me, I guess the worst stuff, well, if I was to do anything over, like I said, would be the height. And if there was a way of doing a layout without any wires, electricity, that would be perfect. But that's not the case. And my favorite stuff is just like you. My background is civil engineering. I love doing buildings, scenery, anything that touches civil engineering. I love it. So,
yeah.
But, there's one thing though. Like Big Bill once said, bigger is not necessarily better. Well, I've got about 20 industries on my layout. Probably I could have gone with 15.
Probably you could have gone with 6.
Yeah, that too.
Yeah, focus. The thing that I think a lot of modelers should take away, not from us necessarily, but us to just match with that, but from so many other very experienced modelers, is having a very clear focus, whatever that is, and probably having a much smaller focus than you think you want. Whether that's Big Bill's recent show talking about bigger is not always better, that's absolutely true, and that applies to this. Also, slightly less complicated. I'm trying, yes, there's a helper district on mine that was very important to me, but I'm largely modeling a commodity, just the coal industry, a little bit of that, with some through freight trades. It is a 15 or so mile section of the railroad that I'm trying to recreate. It's a very defined focus. It's a very small focus.
So any last questions while we're at it?
No, I think that's everything that we covered. I think there's some interest in a few things that we probably that I've taken a few notes on that we should that we'll bring up in some of the later shows that are more specific. We've got a few more shows. What have you guys going to tell them what to look forward to?
Our next show is going to be over actually doing some bench work. And then the shows after that will be, let's see here, sub road bed, track work, electrical, terrain, ground cover, structures, roadways, including sidewalks, and final scenic touches.
So we're going to be in our trade rooms with the cameras over our shoulders. So you're going to see us work while we talk about it.
So just a quick note about bench work. Two of us have already finished all of our bench work out. So that'd be Lloyd and myself. So we're going to go ahead and just do some screen shares and kind of really just talk through what we did and how we built it via pictures. Andy and Tim have bench work to complete yet. So they'll be actually doing some over the cameras. Once we get into road bed and sub road bed, though, our third show, that's when all four of the cameras will be face down and nitty gritty while we're working.
And that's all assuming that you consider what I do as bench work, because there's not much. It is a surface that a layout ends up.
There's no real actual bench to it.
Not exactly. It's very different.
But one of the objectives of these shows is that it's how we're building it. So I've got one way of doing it. Tim's got one way. Andy's got one way. Robert's got one way. And I'm sure everybody else has got their own way. But basically, we're just going to show you how we worked on we're working on our layouts.
Yeah.
And Andy's got some weird ways of doing it, from suspending it from the ceiling to mounting it on shelf brackets. So,
yeah, the whole point behind this is Andy and I were talking about developing this show. There's a few wrong ways to do things, as with anything else you can really think of, but there's a lot of right ways to do model railroading and get the end result that you want. So hopefully we can maybe provide you with 3 or 4 different ideas in how to construct your layout if you're building a new one or building in any extra.
And tripods are for prototyping. The thing that
I wondered if you were gonna get there.
Okay, the thing that I've done, while I have went back and digitally designed my plan, and it's been a lot of help and inspiration, and thanks to Robert and this show for pushing me to get a digital copy to share with you guys. But I played it all out 1-to-1, so I want to be able to see it. I want to get it up where I can. So I build stuff, put it up 1-to-1, put it up and I'm building quite literally at eye level. I'm not exactly a super tall guy. I don't butt my head very much though, but I'm not a very tall person, but I wanted to build it at quite literally eye level. And the only way to envision what you're going to see and how the obstructions are going to affect that scene composition is to get it up there where you can see it. So I put it up on tripods, and I'm very, very, very glad I did, because I initially thought I was going to go at something like 40-some inches, 48 inches, eye level, according to what people say the layouts at eye level. That's not eye level. That's armpit height. But as I got it up there and realized what it looked like, I really went all out with completely eye level. I wouldn't have done that if I hadn't been able to stick it up on tripods and experiment with it first. So experimentation is important.
That's like if I do this, my layout's at eye level.
Well,
all right, everybody, let's go ahead. We'll go ahead and wind this down. Thank you for joining us on our first launch show of this fun new series we're going to be working on. Please go and check out Johnny's show, Bill's show, Ralph's show, any other shows that we do. I think they're a lot of fun. With that, thank you. Have a great night, everybody.